Your leadership team is drowning in work, meetings, reports, initiatives, dashboards. Everyone's executing. Everyone's busy. And yet you're no closer to your goals than you were 6 months ago. Here's why. You've confused activity with strategy. And that confusion is costing you focus, momentum, and the one thing mature organizations can't afford to lose: clarity. Most leadership teams skip the step that defines the actual problem. They jump straight to execution because it feels productive. But if you're solving the wrong problem, all that activity is just expensive noise. And the worst part, you won't know you're off course until you've burnt a quarter or a year chasing the wrong outcomes. In this video, I'm going to show you the 4-step operating system that stops strategic drift and forces focus, even when you have 20 priorities screaming for attention. It's called the Business Strategy Lifecycle. And if you implement it, you'll know exactly what to work on, when to work on it, and how to measure whether it's actually moving the business forward. Here's the deal. Startups are forced to focus because they don't have a choice. Limited resources, limited time, survival mode. But mature companies, you have resources to do everything, which means you try to do everything. And that dilutes your energy, fragments your team, and turns your strategy into a wish list. Focus isn't a personality trait, it's a discipline. And without a system enforcing it, you drift. I've worked with dozens of leadership teams who came to me saying, "We have a great team, we have the resources, but we can't get traction." When I asked them to show me their strategy, they showed me a roadmap with 15 initiatives. I asked which 2 were they betting the quarter on? Silence. Because they didn't know. They were managing, not leading. And that's the gap this system closes. Point number 1. If you skip the analyze phase, you solve the wrong problem. And you won't realize it until you've already executed. Here's what happens when you skip analyze. Someone on the leadership team identifies a symptom. Revenue is flat, turnover is high, customer complaints are up, and you immediately jump to a solution. We need better sales training. We need to hire faster. We need a new CRM. But symptoms aren't problems. Symptoms point to problems. If you don't take the time to understand the root cause, you end up treating the wrong thing. It's like going to the doctor with a headache and then they hand you an aspirin without asking questions. Maybe it's dehydration. Maybe it's a tumor. Maybe it's because you haven't slept in 3 days. The aspirin might help you today, but if the real problem is structural, you're just masking it. The analyze phase forces you to ask, what is actually broken here? What's the underlying cause? What would success look like if we fixed it? It's diagnostics work, and most teams skip it because it feels slow. But I promise you, spending 2 weeks getting the problem right will save you 3 months of wasted execution. If your team is constantly busy but nothing improves, this is why. You're executing without understanding. You're in motion, but you're not moving forward. The analyze phase is the foundation. Without it, everything else is guesswork. Point number 2. The development phase is where you turn your diagnostics into a plan. Skip it, and your team will execute, but they'll execute different strategies. Let's say you've done the analyze work. You know the real problem. Great. Now what? This is where most leadership teams say, okay, everyone go fix it. And then they're shocked when marketing builds on one thing, sales expects another, and operations can't support either. That's what happens when you skip develop. Strategy without alignment is just noise. The development phase is where you get everyone on the same page. You define the specific outcomes you're chasing, you clarify who owns what, you decide what you're not doing. That last part is crucial because without boundaries, your team will try to do everything and accomplish nothing. This is where the business strategy lifecycle becomes your operating system. The development phase connects your vision and your mission to your actual execution. It answers the question, what does success look like and how will we know when we've hit it? If you can't answer that in one sentence, you don't have a strategy, you have tactics. If your leadership team is aligned in the room, but your departments are running separate plays, you skip this step. Alignment isn't a speech, it's a structure, and the development phase builds that structure. A quick note, I created a simple infographic to help you remember the difference between tactics and strategy. You can find it on my website at mannypalachuk.com/tactics-v-strategy. Point number 3. Execution is where strategy either becomes real or dies in a shared drive. I've seen leadership teams spend weeks developing a beautiful strategy. Frameworks, roadmaps, dashboards, they present it to the organization, everyone nods, and then nothing. 3 months later, the same issues are back. The strategy is sitting in a folder somewhere because no one executed. Execution breaks down when there's no ownership, no cadence, and no consequence. If the strategy isn't tied to someone's actual work, their quarterly goals, their weekly priorities, their performance reviews, it's just wallpaper. The execute phase is where you align ownership, set rhythms, and create accountability. Here's the truth. Strategy doesn't fail because it's wrong. It fails because no one does it. The execute phase forces discipline. You pick 2 initiatives per quarter, not 10, not 5, 2. And you execute those with precision before you move on. That's how you build momentum instead of spreading your team thin. Think of it like this. You can have the best work plan in the world, but if you don't show up to the gym, you're not getting stronger. Execution is showing up. And the business strategy lifecycle makes sure someone's accountable for showing up every week. If your strategy looks good on paper but doesn't change behavior, this is the gap. You need structure around execution, rhythm, owners, and consequences. Otherwise, strategy is just performance art. Now, if you're leading an organization that's outgrown your current systems and you're tired of being the bottleneck, I work with founders and senior leaders on exactly this. Building the operating systems that scale without you. It's not consulting, it's coaching. And it's designed for leaders who are serious about moving from heroic effort to next level execution. If that's you, let's talk. Okay, point number 4. If you're not measuring, you're guessing, and guessing doesn't scale. Let me ask you a question. How do you know if your current strategy is working? And I don't mean it feels like we're making progress. I mean, what are you measuring? What numbers tell you whether you're on track or off course? If you can't answer that in 10 seconds, you've likely skipped the measure phase. What gets measured gets done. That's not motivational fluff. It's operational reality. If you're not tracking the right metrics, your team will optimize for the wrong outcomes. They'll chase activities instead of results. They'll look busy instead of being effective. And you won't catch it until the quarter's over. The measure phase closes the loop in the business strategy lifecycle. You define the problem in analyze. You build the plan in develop. You execute in execute. Now you measure whether it worked. And here's the key. You measure early and often, not at the end of the quarter, weekly. Because if you're off course, you'll need to know now, not 3 months from now when you've already burnt the budget. I worked with a leadership team that was executing a customer retention strategy. Great plan, strong team. 3 months in, I asked them what their retention rate was. They didn't know. They were tracking activity, emails sent, calls made, meetings booked, but they had no idea if any of it was keeping customers. That's what happens when you skip measure. You execute in the dark. If you feel like your team is always reacting instead of steering, this is why. Without measurement, you're flying blind. The measure phase gives you feedback, and feedback is what turns execution into improvement. Without it, you're just repeating the same process and hoping for different results. Here's the hard truth. The reason you're not getting traction isn't lack of talent, it's lack of focus. And focus is a choice. 2 initiatives per quarter is usually enough. I know that sounds insane. You have 20 priorities. The board wants growth in 5 areas. Your team is capable. Why should you only pick 2? Here's why. Because dilution kills momentum. When you have 10 priorities, you have 0 priorities. Your team is fragmented, your resources spread thin, and nothing gets the focus it needs to actually succeed. Startups are forced to focus because they don't have a choice. Limited cash, limited people, limited time, but mature companies, you have enough resources to chase everything, and that's the trap. You think scale means doing more, but scale means doing the right things with precision. And precision requires focus. Here's what I tell every leadership team I work with. If you can't define why something is in your top 2, it doesn't belong in the quarter. That doesn't mean that your other initiatives are bad. It means they're not the current constraint. And if you're serious about strategy, you work to relieve the constraint, the biggest bottleneck, not the wish list. This is the shift that separates leadership from management. Managers try to do everything. Leaders choose. And that choice, the discipline, is what the business strategy lifecycle enforces. It's not a framework for doing more, it's an operating system for doing what matters. If your team is capable but you're not seeing results, ask yourself, are we focused or are we busy? Because those aren't the same thing. And until you enforce focus as a discipline, you keep spinning. Let me bring this together. The business strategy lifecycle isn't a model you learn, it's an operating system you run. The business strategy lifecycle connects your vision, mission, products, services, and performance measures into one coherent execution engine. That's the definition. Here's what it actually does. It stops you from drifting. It forces you to ask the right questions at the right time. It makes sure everyone on your leadership team is rowing in the same direction. And it gives you a feedback loop so you know when something's working or when it's not. Most leadership teams have pieces of this. You have a mission statement, you have a quarterly goals, you have dashboards, but they're not connected. So when something breaks, you don't know where the failure point is. The life cycle connects the pieces. It makes strategy operational, not aspirational. I spent years coaching senior leaders who were stuck in reactive mode. Capable people, strong business, but everything depends on them. They couldn't step away because the system didn't hold without their presence. The business strategy lifecycle is the system that holds. It's how you move from heroic leadership to sustainable stewardship. It's how you build an organization that doesn't need you to make every decision. And here's the unlock. Once you have the operating system in place, strategy stops being a yearly retreat exercise. It becomes how you run the business. Analyze what's broken, develop the plan, execute with discipline, measure the results, and repeat. That's not an irregular tactic, it's a rhythm. And rhythm is what turns good companies into great ones. Let's recap. Strategy is a life cycle. Analyze, develop, execute, measure. Skip any phase and you're either solving the wrong problem, lack alignment, stall in execution, or drift without feedback. The business strategy lifecycle is the operating system that connects all four phases and enforces the discipline that mature organizations need to stay focused. And focus isn't a personality trait, it's a choice. 2 initiatives per quarter, that's the constraint that creates momentum. Here's the question most leadership teams ask me after we install the system. Okay, we have the life cycle, we have focus. Now how do we make sure teams actually execute without us micromanaging every step? Well, now that you understand the business strategy life cycle and why most teams confuse tactics with strategy, you need to know how to build a team that executes without needing you in every decision. In my next video, why your great team still can't execute, I'll show you exactly how to move from heroic leadership to sustainable stewardship and why accountability doesn't have to feel stress. You've built the system, now let's build the culture that runs it.